And with that, we're ready to begin our first conversation by turning to what may be one of the most important demand signals industrialized construction has seen, the scale of upcoming military construction. Barracks and dormitories require many of the same capabilities that the broader industrialized housing sector is working to build: repeatable designs, predictable quality, faster delivery, cost control, and scalable execution across multiple sites. Our next session is the future of demand, military housing construction, and where scalable programmatic wave of industrialized construction is coming from next. We're going to welcome Colby Swanson to the stage with Karthik Bharat and Dr. Tim Sullivan.
We good? Can we hear me?
No, that one's off.
That one's off. All right, guys. Let's get the mics going. There we go. One on. You got to turn them on there, Tim. Check, check.
Check. Check, baby. Check, baby. 1, 2, 3.
Check. All right. So I see a lot of familiar faces. Good afternoon. Really great to have everybody back year two. For those of you who don't know me, real quick introduction, Colby Swanson. I manage the industrialized construction practice at ADL Ventures. And real briefly, I spent a career fixing broken buildings. It gives you an interesting perspective on our industry, why things are the way they are. And it was in that experience that I landed into the industrialized construction space. And quite frankly, that is going to be one of the tools and one of the ways that we modernize across the industry. So I think most everybody agrees demand and the demand of products, the way we think about construction today is it's very much a project by project cycle. And it's very different. It's very difficult if you're in the manufacturing environment, you own a factory, to try and stabilize your pipeline when you don't have a steady product, you don't have a steady demand. And today, we are very fortunate to have these two individuals who are leaders in the military environment, and they are going to talk about, and we are going to talk about the demand that is needed by our services for industrialized construction. And just like the last talk, we're going to save time so that you all get to interface and ask questions. So with that, I'm going to ask Dr. Sullivan and Karthik to just quickly introduce yourselves, and then we'll dive into some questions.
Thanks, Colby. Tim Sullivan, the Director of Facility Engineering at the Air Force Civil Engineers Center in San Antonio. I am responsible for built infrastructure throughout the Air Force worldwide, roughly about $520 billion in capital assets that I'm responsible for. We have about $48 billion in construction under management right now, roughly $4.5 to $5 billion annual budget. That's set to probably triple to quadruple next year, depending on how much money we get from Congress. So we'll see. So we have quite the pipeline, quite the workload, and right now we are expected to move faster, but we'll talk more about that later.
Karthik.
Good afternoon. My name is Karthik Bharat. I work at NAVFAC, Naval Facilities Systems Engineering Command. So I represent so most people don't know what that is. So our teams are responsible to deliver construction projects for the Navy, Marine Corps, and some of our defense clients. So basically we support Air Force in some situations. So my job is I'm the director for military construction programs. So I'm responsible to oversee and, including submitting budgets to Congress and also the tracking and management of over $6 to $10 billion of construction projects every year. I don't do it by myself. I have a huge team and also thousands of people in the field doing the work of actually doing the construction oversight and contracting and design that needs to happen to make it happen. But like as Tim mentioned, we are expecting a huge swell of funding in 27. That's what we're projecting. And most of that funding is in barracks and a few other places. So that's my interest in being on a journey for the last 2 years to learn about this and get prepared to execute on industrialized construction for those programs in a way that will be fast and cost effective for the military.
So this audience doesn't need to be convinced of industrialized construction. Everybody here is sold. And really what we want to focus on is where are these opportunities? Like, let's get into some specifics, how they can get involved. That's what industry needs to know. So let's get into it. We'll start with what's actually coming. And you both talked a little bit about the size of the market, but let's just sort of break down a little bit more, like next year, keep it focused on 2027. What does that pipeline look like in terms of square footage or volume of product? Speak a little bit about the actual typologies of interest that are relevant to industrialized construction. So let's just talk about some nuts and bolts. 2027, what do you see happening, Air Force?
Yeah, well, actually, let me talk about next week. We are doing the medical education and training campus, which was done through industrialized construction before, but using type 5 construction, which was not appropriate for that campus, and it failed rather quickly. And so this is an interesting one because we originally wanted to redo it using industrialized construction, and using traditional construction, we were thinking it would take like 9 years. It's 5 facilities, 6,000 bed spaces, and it's actually got 1 Air Force facility, 2 Army facilities, and 2 Navy facilities on Fort Sam Houston and San Antonio. And then we thought, through our analysis, we can save 30% of time and 20% of budget and get this within about 5 years. And OSW came back and said, that's great, get it done in 2. So now we are charged with getting the entire construction, which is about $2.3 billion, done in 24 months. And we're expected to award the construction phase next week.
I see a couple people chuckling in the audience. The challenge that is being faced here is obviously you've got to do so much. So can you speak a little bit about the industrialized construction component, where you think that's going to plug and play, how that helps you meet that timeline?
And we are full in on industrialized construction for that, modular. And I'll go back a step and say the Air Force has not had any kind of comprehensive or we'll say effective use of industrialized construction. We have a 3D printed facility in the Air Force at Tyndall Air Force Base that we did as a let's see how this works kind of thing. It was by Icon. We have some tensile facilities here and there that are really done because of our funding rules. You can purchase those as equipment rather than having to get those line item approved by Congress. So it's a way to get them built and funded that's easier, which is a concern because we're not always sure exactly what engineering was done to make sure they're safe and we have had some failures. But it hasn't been a comprehensive strategy. And as far as modular, which we're doing for the dorms, that's not really been a thing for us. And, dorms and rehabilitating dorms and replacing dorms is a very important thing for the entire Department of War to ensure that where our service members stay is safe and healthy. So billions of dollars are going to be invested to rehabilitate these, and we have to do it in the most economical and fast way possible. And so Colby and I have had conversations, and the light bulb came on, and I say Colby weaponized me, but I don't know that he really likes that expression so much. But it came on that that's the way we need to go. So I told my team, we're all in on industrialized, that's what we're gonna do. I'm not 100% convinced I had the authority to do that, but I did it. And so that's the way we're going. We're all in on industrialized, period, because what we were seeing in traditional construction, we were getting into the $700,000 a bed space arena, and that's absurd. That is unaffordable, and we were at the point of saying, I told them, just go buy them houses on the market. This is ridiculous.
So we'll come back. I want to hear a little bit more about, outside of just barracks and dorms, what else you're thinking about in terms of industrialized construction. But I want to give the mic to Karthik to talk about your demand and thinking about 2027, what that looks like in terms of typologies, maybe even where some of this demand is. Like Tim's talking about Texas, a little bit broader landscape with yours.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not sure how many of you guys know about where Navy and Marine Corps bases are primarily, but a lot of them on the coast, so East and West Coast. So in terms of demand, just like Tim, we have a project ongoing right now, which is pretty close to we're a month and a half away from awarding it. It's about $1.4 billion projected construction at about, I think it's about 1.4 million square feet, roughly. And that's the near-term project that we are tracking to. In addition to that, we actually announced it in the SAME.gov, so it's out there. So the next project we're planning to put out, or at least this is not in priority order, but Camp Pendleton, we're planning to do about 1,000 square feet, about 1.4 billion. This also includes, the reason some of these numbers may sound different is because some of them include demo and some ancillary facilities, so it's not just barracks, but it's because it requires that, so that's included in the scope. MCI East, all like Lejeune, Cherry Point, French Creek areas. Another project, about 1.4 million square feet, another 2.1 billion. Again, another West Coast project in Yuma, Twin Palms, a few more, still Camp Pendleton. Camp Pendleton is large, so there's a lot of barracks to be replaced there, including Miramar, about another 700K on another billion. So in addition to that, that's the barracks outlook. What I don't have on this list is potential for some other Navy barracks also. It's still being worked out. Some of the requirements are being finalized. So that may also be another $1 billion potentially in 27. In addition to that, we're also looking at typologies in CDCs. Most people know what that's. It's not the CDC that you typically hear about the news. It's child development centers, trying to do industrialized construction, either through panelized construction and/or modular construction in those ways. And we have close to $1 billion in CDCs over the next 4 years. We want to do it through industrialized construction. So those are the demand signals. The near-term projects using IC that we're planning to, we're actively seeking opportunities to make that happen.
The announcement that Karthik talked about, I think on sam.gov, and if anybody wants to find that, it's a list of all the projects that he just mentioned for 2027, the square footage of the buildings, so where the buildings are at. So that if you don't have that and you don't know, you want to know where that is, come talk to Karthik. Tim probably knows where that is. I can tell you the link. Maybe we can put the link up on a slide at some point. Okay, so one of the things about, I think that's different, and I'd like to keep on this track, which is the demand is, the way you're coming out to the market is different. You're not doing it the same way you've done in the past, where it's sort of a single project or on a project-by-project basis. Can you describe a little bit, Tim, starting with you, on why you're doing that differently and what you think that will result in? And Karthik, I think the same thing to you.
Right, and to loop back to your initial question, we have roughly $1.5 billion in FY27 that we anticipate for dorms in industrialized construction. But yes, the Department of War writ large is fundamentally changing how we acquire facilities. The traditional design build or design bid build methods are persona non grata. We are now moving to using other transactional authority, which I don't know. I'm assuming people have some level of knowledge of the federal acquisition regulations, or maybe not.
Probably some, but I would say
okay.
most people don't know OTA versus FAR.
Right.
Just a quick one, I'll give it
Yeah.
to you. FAR is how they typically acquire buildings. It's slow, it's very rigid. Military has embraced what they call OTAs, or other transaction authorities. This gives them a lot more flexibility. with how they go to contract, how they procure. And it's opening up the door for what we now talk about in terms of programming a series of buildings, packaging a series of projects where you can get that demand, that stable, manufacturing pipeline that you really need.
Right. So basically, what we are doing now, instead of doing okay, we need to build a dorm over here and over here and over here, they're all separate acquisitions. Under other transactional authorities, we don't have to use the FAR, Federal Acquisition Regulation. We can now do what will be more aligned with a commercial type contract. So we can say, do a quals-based selection to do a progressive design build type environment, and we can pick a company or a series of companies and say, we're going to build multiple dorms, and we want to pick the best company, and we want to build them in all these different locations, and if you're the person we pick, build here, here, and here. So instead of 3 acquisitions, we're doing 1. We can achieve much more economy of scale, and we can save time just not having to do 3 different acquisitions.
Karthik, you want to talk a little bit about how NAVFAC is thinking about programming all of this work for 2027 and why you're doing it that way?
I mean, Tim kind of explained it, right? Like the traditional methods of design bid build just doesn't work cleanly well for industrialized construction, and we recognized that last year, and which is why we pioneered partnering with other services to get other transaction authority into law, which luckily made it through. Now we have that authority, which allows us to do the progressive design build method, right? That's something that it's very common in industry, especially when you have these complex ways of delivering projects, when you have multiple stakeholders that need to come together to execute the work. And progressive design build allows you to, in a much more risk managed way, to deliver that project. So that's kind of that's why we're trying to embrace, and we had success with one project that we did under OTA about 2 years ago, which is kind of gave us the idea of allowing us to do this. And while we were on the journey to understand industrialized construction, we realized that's the only way to really do it. FAR-based mechanisms just will not produce the outcomes we're looking for. Can we do industrialized construction with the FAR? Absolutely. But will we get the cost savings? Maybe not, right? Or the speed? Possibly not. Can we combine projects into FAR? Yeah, you can do that. But it has other rules and restrictions and procedures, and the terms and conditions that needed to be negotiated with the industry. That's not possible under FAR. Whereas in the OTA, we can do that. So those are the procurement mechanisms and delivery mechanism that allows us in the OTA is what we were excited to implement now.
So 2 very different organizations. Traditionally, NAVFAC, AVCAC, Air Force, and USACE, these are the engineering construction groups of the military. They have different missions, they have different approaches. How do you guys talk a little bit about how you see your approach, maybe where there's commonalities in that approach now, how you're looking at barracks? I think it's fairly uncommon to see the branches all thinking about programming almost together. How do we go out to the market and help the market help us by collecting and aggregating our demand and sharing that demand rather than each branch sort of doing their own thing? And maybe from a design perspective too, like what are you doing that's common versus what are you going to continue to do that's different?
Yeah, so my biggest concern is that we independently hit the market all over the place, and we're competing internally for factory space, and we have different requirements, and the Air Force wants it this way, and the Navy wants it 6 inches wider, and you're retooling factories to meet different needs that are they're very close, but they're slightly different. So we reached agreement that we would have a standard structural box that will be different internally, because of course every service has different standards for their barracks dormitory. But the structural member, we can work to make that the same, and then you can customize what goes inside, and of course customize how you align them, stack them, and arrange them. We want to clearly signal to industry how much we're going to need and where we're going to need it by topology, so you understand where it's coming. In an ideal world, we can lay this all out over a long period of time and say, in this state, we're going to need 10,000, and in this state, we're going to need 5,000 here, here, and here. So everybody understands exactly what's going to happen, and we can back that up with money. Because no one is going to build a factory on a maybe. And the last thing we want is to have a plan, and then we put it on the street, and there's no capacity to support it. So we're trying to work through all those things and collaborate across the services. So one, we can communicate with the industry, so you know what's coming, when it's coming, and where it's coming. And two, so we're not doing fratricide across industry and just competing with each other and making this not work well.
Do you want to build on that? I've got another, I'll let you go first, but I've got another.
I also want to, to add on what Tim mentioned, right? One thing we also realized over the last year, at least in the Navy infrastructure side, is in order to go after these, we need to take a very programmatic approach to delivering of these programs. We have a traditional model of how we are organized just doesn't work for this. It requires central change control for it. So this way, things that Chris Strauss mentioned, right? We can't allow commanders to come and change 2 years later, because commanders are going to change every 2 years in the field. They come and say, I want something different, because they're the commander. The decision space is being taken away from them, especially when it comes to barracks. The senior commander is going to make the call. Any changes associated with it will have to be approved by him or her before it kind of goes down. So that change control is crucial for industrialized construction, so they can be successful, so we can scale it and repeatable, and the feedback loops can help drive costs down and speed up the future projects. So that's one of the major organizational and process changes we are trying to implement using the barracks program. Because typically, like Tim mentioned, right, what we've done is we set policies and criteria, we put it out there and then say, go out there and execute. And everybody out there, all the projects I mentioned, I think there's about 60 projects on that list overall, and there'll be 60 different contracts doing 60 different ways with minor variations to executing, and then each one will be a bespoke project. Even though look and feel somewhat the same, but there is, as you know, engineering at the construction side will be different, and those differences add cost and time and design expectations, design standards, and all those things. So, and that's what we're trying to control for, so that we can actually implement industrialized construction in a way that will be helpful. So, not everybody's aligned yet, we are in the early stages of implementing it, so there's a cultural change happening. We have folks from NAVFAC here, and our Army, and then also Air Force here. But it also takes, leadership is truly aligned to this. That's one thing we have 100%, I think across the services, senior levels are totally bought off on this, right? They're like, go do it, make it happen. And so now we just need to elevate to them what organizational structural changes we need to be able to execute this at scale and at speed. And they're totally responsive to this, so we're leveraging that openness to make the changes needed to implement it from an organizational perspective. So I wanted to just add that piece.
Yeah, I was wondering if you think it might be useful, either one of you, to talk about how the competitive process might look 2 years from now that's different than the way it looks today. Just if you walk through how teams compete and what's going to be different about that competition. How does it change in this industrialized programmatic approach?
Yeah, well, historically, it has been I think, somewhat of a black box for industry, where we put a solicitation out and there are, you slide questions under the door, we slide answers back out under the door, and there isn't a lot of direct communication necessarily. And we go into our smoke-filled room, we pick a winner, and then we're done. Under the OT process, there will be, typically what will happen is we'll put a challenge statement out, which is much different from a traditional solicitation. It's much smaller, shorter. And we will essentially say, you know, we want a dorm, and our preferred method of construction is industrialized construction. It's going to house this many people. It will have common areas of this, you know, blah, 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 at this location. It'll be a few pages long. And we will get interested vendors. Will submit pitches that are, you know, a few pages long. We'll review them. We'll do an initial scrub. And then we'll invite vendors in to give pitches where we can, you know, they can give presentations, do a down select, and then get additional information from those down selected firms. And then we'll down select to 3, and they will probably progress. And then we'll make a final down select to 1. And through that entire process, there is actual human interaction and an opportunity to confer and discuss and make sure everybody has an understanding of what the requirement is, rather than the old way where it was a more formal, rigid, and less collaborative process.
Karthik, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, the process, I mean, one thing I would mention is there will be, in what Tim just described is the OT process that we have followed for the current projects, that especially the one from Mitzi and also the brick projects, if some of you are familiar with that. But as we are, all the services and across the department developing new authorities or new processes for OTAs, there'll be some variations in the process, so do expect that, and we'll publish it, and we'll make sure folks understand it and before we implement it, to either speed up the acquisition phase of the process. But for now, I just want to, you know, that is a process that we may follow. There may be other processes, but the foundations of that is the collaborative nature about it will not change, right? That's the key part. Like, we want collaboration through the acquisition process, which has not been something we could naturally do in the FAR-based process.
Would it be a stretch to say that this seems to be moving towards what we would say a DOW barrack or dorm rather than individual, so you're sort of controlling the product?
No, I would say at this moment we're working towards that. I'm not.
Let's say we're.
I would say we're working towards that. At the moment, for the 27 program, it's going to be a Navy. But when I say Navy, it's Marine Corps. Like 95% of the work we'll be doing from the barracks will be Marine Corps. With a small portion with the Navy, and so it'll be kind of the Navy standards and the Marine Corps standards. But we're working to see how to change that for the future. So I think there's ongoing discussions between the services to see how we can, you know, find that commonality of requirements and also the design standards. So part of it is the Mitzi dorms, and then the first project Air Force is going to do next up right after that, and then the brick project is going to really help us learn from what that even look like. But right now, all we have is ideation at this point. All ideas, layouts. We haven't really seen the designs for the modular building that we want, modular room that we want to build. Taking that and actually doing more engineering-based, you know, standardization is what we want to do next, so that we can apply it for future projects. So in terms of demand, I want to just answer the question like four questions ago, right? Even though we have a huge demand in 27, and you know, but Marine Corps, especially when their top priority is renovation and recapitalization of their barracks, full stop. Commandant's first priority in infrastructure space is barracks. So they have actively planned to invest over $2.5 billion, $2 to $2.5 billion, but 1 million to 2 million square feet of new construction over the next 5 years. Okay, that's the upcoming demand that they've, so far it's guaranteed in the budget at this point. So they have reallocated all their funds to focus on barracks at that stage. Some of that money is going to go to renovation, and some of that is going to go to new construction. So we're also very interested in renovation, industrialized construction and renovation. That's the next project we got to take on. And there are some interesting technologies out there that can help achieve that. But you know, we're looking into that. But that's the outlook that's the outlook that we see in barracks, for sure at this point.
Let's go there. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other typologies of interest that may not be conventionally thought of as, oh, that's a really good, repeatable product, but actually we maybe need to rethink that. What do you guys have coming down the pike that might fit into that category?
Yeah, two things of particular interest. Karthik mentioned child development centers. The other one is secure spaces. And the reason for both of those are difficult to construct, and we have a fair number. CDCs are a pain in the ass to build. They have to be specially certified, and I won't get on my soapbox about this, but there is some push for zero risk environment that makes them very challenging to construct. Very, very precise requirements, so it's difficult to get them certified, difficult to get them to pass the test. So if we can build them in a factory environment where we can control everything, that would be much better. Secure spaces are extremely challenging, and if what I'm talking about here are areas where you perform classified work, very tight requirements to prevent sound transmission, electromagnetic wave transmission, and those requirements change. And when you're doing bespoke facilities, it's particularly difficult because you have to do inspections at various times. You can only have, in some cases, cleared workers, or you have to have escorted workers. You can't have non-foreign nationals working in there many times. So there's all these things that happen and make it very expensive, very, very difficult. So if we can have them built in a cleared factory where the inspections happen at the factory, they're certified in the factory, they're locked up, shipped on site, assembled on site, and we can certify them like that, that would be a beautiful, beautiful thing. What
What are those facilities, just paint a visual picture of what this secure, like how big is this facility? Is it multi-story? Is it just one like small box? How many of them?
It ranges. We have facilities that are tens of thousands of square feet. We have facilities that are, a typical size office. They're all different. But there are ones that, where they're STC class, where you basically have to be, blasting music full blast and you can't hear it on the other side of the door. And they have to have a 6-sided metal box to prevent electromagnetic transmission, which are doing in the field is challenging.
Karthik, any other like typologies of interest that you think might be relevant that NAVFAC is going to be building over the next 3 to 5 years?
I mean, the near term is what Tim talked about: barracks, CDCs, and secure spaces. If you've read the last NDAA and also the new one, Congress has been telling us to go do it. Obviously, similar to the HUD secretary was talking about, right? Like we got the authorization telling us to go do stuff. They didn't give us any money for it. They want us to do modular type work in secure spaces. So we're looking at how to scale that up beyond just the box. How do you do that for maybe larger spaces and whatnot? But it's in terms of priority, a priority is barracks and CDCs and then secure spaces. The area that we want to also start exploring in the near term is what does industrialization look like in other typologies? It's just we don't. Part of it is we go to the analysis and start to show to Navy leadership so that they can properly program projects appropriately. Because barracks, as I mentioned, they have one of the key ingredients to industrialization is repeatability and consistency of resources, right? So we don't think like that when it comes to programming. When I say programming, like deciding which project we want to do, right? And projects. We do it based on the priority, obviously priority of the mission that's need for that year. And they don't take into account the economics when they decision on this. So we need to be able to show if we can do, let's say, hangars this way, or if we can do admin buildings this way, or if we can do, other buildings like in, like places, not bases, like Indo-PACOM this way. How does the economics look like so that we can convince them to actually, program projects appropriately this way? So that's more of a science project we have to do so that we can actually convince folks to change their minds to that the funding can be laid in appropriately. So that's the space we're trying to explore in that area, but nothing certain at this point.
Great. You actually brought up a term maybe not everybody's familiar with, but a lot of all the construction I believe you're talking about here is all CONUS. So it's continental U.S. Is that correct? No.
Well, what we're looking at, a lot of it is predominantly yes. However, we would gladly export this. We're responsible for facilities all around the world. We also need to understand, however, that in some countries we have different construction agents. In Germany, their government does the construction for us. There's agreements like that in place. So it gets a little complicated, but it would be around the world.
CONUS is the primary, but we do have projects potentially in Europe, like in Rota, Spain, and also in Hawaii, even though Hawaii is not considered CONUS, Hawaii. And it gets a little bit tricky in Japan and other areas where we don't really have, like Japan does construction for us and we oversee that. But Hawaii and Europe, we do have some opportunities, but the scale is small at this point. But luckily, we want to leverage, Europe having those, opportunities, or they're a lot more kinder to the industrialized construction space, that hopefully we can actually do smaller projects there. So we haven't figured that out yet, but that's the near-term demand that we're seeing.
So I want to wrap up with, and then I want to open up the floor. Alyssa, how much time how are we doing on time? How many? 40. Oh, then we got tons of time. Hey, we must have made up a lot of time on that previous. Okay, nice job, Todd. So then let me expand on something that I think would be useful for the crowd to think about. The engagement process. So you alone with just these two branches, you're looking at 7 million square feet of product next year in 2027 that will be awarded. And then that continues to go on into 28, 29, 30. And so everybody must be just, how do we get engaged? What information can we do? And the audience is probably, I'm sure a lot of people already have their first sentence figured out. They want to come up and they want to say, what do you want to know from them? What do you not need to hear? So what would be like the information that would be most helpful for you versus the information that, doesn't really do anything?
I think the big question is, what do you need from us so you, as an industry, you can be ready to meet this demand?
I mean, that's the general question, right? I mean, we have a major demand question in 27. Like, can the industry meet that for us? Obviously, we don't have the Army here, but Army also has spending some money in 27. But the piece that I want for you all to understand is we're not in the business like for IC space, right? I mean, there are many ways of doing it. Mano is here, right? When he did Susan M, he actually managed multiple contracts and coordinated it for projects at the site. That's why I understand it. We won't do that, right? We will hire typically a single, entity, the project we hire for will need to have the right team. So the demand, the ask to you is you need to be working to partner with the right teams out there to be able to be ready to support these projects. Because we'll go to a single team, most likely be GC or the coordinator, who'll have the coordination responsibility for the project across the manufacturer, the sequencers, the setters, the GC, the subcontractors need the site build, everything that needs to. So they'll have that holistic perspective to make that happen. We won't be individually going to a manufacturer. We won't be at this point. We haven't figured out exactly how. We want to look at the opportunities to do that, but right now the contracting mechanisms don't allow us to do that yet. There is a new law under NDAA called Multi-Year Procurement Authority, which is also something we put out. That may give us the opportunity to do some other means of trying to approach industrialized construction, but we're not touching that in 27. We plan that for the future. But so in terms of what you understand, to answer Kobe's question, what do you need to do is start engaging with the people in this room, right? Figure out who the bigger GCs are, who the integrators are. Let them know what your capacities are. Make sure that you know how you can deliver that you're ready to manufacturer. If a manufacturer, like, hey, I can do barracks, right? Make sure that the whole room knows that. So when they're thinking about, hey, do I have capacity? Who do I go to get that work done? They have you in mind, or they're part of their team when we put those solicitations out. So that's the way I would think about it. So this way, you know that the means of our engagement is that, but we get to know you. You want to give us cards and whatnot, which is great. But there is no natural way for me to like directly go to a manufacturer and say, oh, do that, build me this, and then we don't have the teams. You're not set up that way to like coordinate that across the different teams that needs to come together to do a IC today. Maybe in the future, but right now that's not our business model right now. But hopefully that helps a little bit to understand what the expectations are. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's hugely helpful. And I think on that, where should people go? Are there events? Are there things that maybe industrialized construction manufacturers don't know about? Like, what can you think of conferences, or where do they get to interface with more military folks who are thinking about this and trying to understand it and get a chance to talk to them?
Yeah, the SAME events. We had JETC not too long ago. We'll have the Small Business Conference in Charlotte in November.
November, yeah.
First week in November. That's going to have a huge DOW presence, and there will be a lot of discussion on this.
So SAME is the Society for American Military Engineers. If you don't know about that conference, there's two big ones every year. There's what they call JETC, which is more of an engineering focused, and then there's the SBC, which is small business focused. These are 3,000, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 people. These are very well attended. So if you don't know about that, please go check it out. Next one is in November in Charlotte.
Yeah, I also want to add is SAME is one of the key engagement points in the association we leverage to put out information, engagement points for us to work with the industry and can understand what's going on in the industry. Also, don't forget that the two events that Kobe talked about is the national events, but there are multiple chapters across the world, and each chapter has their own events too. And some are really big, and some are well put together, and some are much more smaller, depending on what it is. So like there's stuff in DC called the Capital Week. Then Hawaii, they have really big ones, and like Norfolk, they'll usually have a big one. So you should, if you're interested in that area, supporting that area, go to those events. So if one thing you want to take away from this, become a member of SAME.com. It truly is. If you want, interested in supporting the military, right? It's because you get to learn and know about the ecosystem around in military construction in a much more effective way. It's not the only one, no, but it's the most prevalent one that we leverage a lot on a regular basis, and their interest is our interest in a way. The missions are well aligned in that space.
So I chair the alternative construction methods at SAME. I got pulled into that by Karthik. Thank you very much. That's a lot of work. But if you want to know about the community inside of SAME that is talking about industrialized construction, come talk to myself or Ankur. Raise your hand real quick. We are involved every week on SAME work. In fact, before I forget, when you come back from the networking break here that we have in about 20 minutes, there's going to be a report on in front of each seat, and that was written by a subcommittee in SAME about industrialized construction. And that bound report has gotten a lot of traction inside of the military. So thanks to Hensel Phelps, Steve, thank you very much, printed those for us, and so everybody will get a hard copy of that. Please read that. SAME is producing that type of content, and it's really an avenue to help educate the military and the private sector on what are we trying to get done here over the next 3 to 5 years. So, yes, 2:30, and we're supposed to end at 3? Okay, I'm gonna probably wrap 10 so we can stay ahead. Why don't we take some questions? I was gonna maybe ask these guys about pricing. Where do you want to land on things? Do you want to?
Yeah, I want to just one other message I want to get out there is like I think Tim kind of talked about a little bit about pricing, right? $700,000 a room. That we like if we do a project and we award a project, we are fired. Like I'm done, right? Like that's not we just can't happen, right? So that's why we are like, I'm not sleepless nights every day trying to get these programs and projects together, because this is like, could happen. So what we really need is, pricing as close to commercial pricing as possible on a military base, right? Like we're looking at, $350 to $500 a square foot for barracks, right? That's kind of what we're looking for, right? Tell us how to achieve that, right? What do you need to achieve that on my military base? That's what we need, right? And I want to go fast. Like Tim has a, impossible target to meet in 2 years, for Betsy. And there are folks coming and telling them they can do it. But we know there's going to be challenges and stuff along the way, but things are going to adjust it. But still, time frame, right? Typical construction projects are 2.5 to 3.5 years long.
5, 6 years.
Yeah, 5, 6 years sometimes. It's ridiculous, right? We got to get stuff done less than 2 years. Even 2 years, and especially when repeatable, it can go, obviously it's possible, but conservatively saying 2 years, but I know some of you, we can do it even faster. So I want you to challenge us, to tell us when you come in, like when you're forming teams and things like that, keep that in mind. Because we start seeing numbers that are closer to what we normally see, do not expect to go past go, like it'll be basically thrown out. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I would add too that will be really interesting is there's also a move to vastly streamline the unified facilities criteria, which is our building code, which is based on the IBC, but we have decided to make it more stringent and more cumbersome and more complicated. And there is a cost premium for that. So it will be interesting to us if people who have typically not played in our market come in and look at the UFC and go, what the hell is this? This doesn't make any sense. Why are we doing this? Because there's, through much fanfare, we have significantly streamlined those documents. And if a party who is not used to them looks at them and goes, this doesn't make sense, I would be very interested to hear that so we can take a deeper look and say, there's more cutting we need to do. And there's someone in the audience who would probably be very interested in that, I'm sure. Scott.
All right, so
Chris Michael is also here, who's the head of criteria for NAVFAC. So if you want to ping him,
There's a lot of criteria.
Right there.
There's a lot of criteria
oh
we
boy,
need.
now we're calling out names.
Yeah.
Chris.
No, I mean, we seriously want your help. Like, if you're asking for things you can help us with, like, that's where we need help. Is like what can we need to do to change so that we can achieve that target, speed and scale, at optimal cost, at the best or better quality than we are currently producing. That's the end game for us. So tell us what we need to do to change to get there. And that's why I wrote my notebook. If you have some ideas, I'm going to write it down. Same thing, take it back and say, we heard it at Industrialized Housing Summit. We got to go change policy.
This is why we're so excited to have these guys, because you tell them what you need. That's what they're looking for. They're trying to figure out how to get this work done that they've got in front of us. And it's a mountain of work to do. So let's take some questions. And I should say also, Tim and Karthik are here both days. So Tim will be back tomorrow. Tim lives down in San Antonio. Karthik's here tonight. So, and then maybe I'll have your team stand up at some point if there's folks you want to just say, hey, here's who else you can talk to about this. I know we already called out one, but let's go to questions. Alyssa, and I see.
We'll transition to.
Yeah.
We'll transition to questions, and just raise your hand and I'll make my way around the room.
Hello, Ryan Kolker at the International Code Council. Certainly appreciate the recognition and the movement to UFCs. One of the sort of challenges that we've seen, and you mentioned the need for consistency. I know there's been a lot of conversation around a UFC around the approvals process for offsite construction. One doesn't currently exist. So wondering if you guys have a strategy for in-factory approvals and the inspection process and what that could potentially look like. I
mean, in that world, it's a little more easy to work with us than, let's say, local communities, because you don't have to deal with thousands of folks out there who have their own codes and permits you deal with. So ours. I mean, we haven't really explored that precisely. I don't even know we have that requirement at this point. As long as it meets our UFC requirements, we need to part of the things we're trying to figure out is what is the certification process would look like, or validation process or QA process would look like, so that what's being designed is what we're going to be delivered on site. So if you want to know that, that's the best question. I'm going to see if Chris, you have an idea? You want to speak to that? Yeah, he's our best guy to talk to about that.
Sorry, I missed part of the question, but I think I got the gist. In the reform to the
Chris, can you speak up? I can't hear you. Is that microphone on?
And don't maybe your mouth.
There it is.
Okay. In part of the reform effort, we did add some language in our DoD building code, which is UFC 12001, to reference a lot of the modular requirements. But overall, as Karthik said, nothing in the UFCs really restrict modular construction. If the industry has issue with that statement, if there are things in there that do, restrict you from doing modular construction, industrialized construction, we have the process of submitting CCRs or reach out to the services to let them know what those issues are, and we'll look into those and see if we can get the UFC revised.
I think there is an opportunity to provide consistency of how those inspections in factories work. We have standards that set those requirements out, and if it's not sort of understood up front what those requirements are, that creates challenges to the factory.
Right. Right.
Great.
Hello. Hey. Connor Jenkins, currently with Swinnerton, but you mentioned the company Icon. So I was with Icon for 5 years and built the first ever 3D printed barracks here in town at Camp Swift. Because of that success, we got another contract, graduated from a camp to a fort, and built 3 more at a different location. The construction of those buildings was really interesting, compelling, and it was great working with the military on those. Something that we faced on both, especially on the second round, was what it took to get a certificate of occupancy and to get troops to be able to live in those barracks. Part of that was our inexperience, right? Not having worked with the military. But part of it, as we worked with different entities, was folks not talking to each other, different standards, things that weren't flagged in the design that came up later. And so yes, I have a question. My question is the entire process getting looked at? You guys mentioned design, architecture, that feels really critical, right? Finding good standards. But the operational execution of what y'all are trying to do is important. But if we execute quickly and then can't get troops into them quickly, that is just as bad as construction happening slowly. So is that getting analyzed, what it looks to inspect them on the back end?
Yeah, so what you experienced was culture clash of you're doing something different. I don't know how to wrap my head around this. And we're experiencing that again. And we are working through that because as an entire community, the design and construction community within Department of War has to change its culture to a culture of velocity. We have to move quickly and do things quickly. And when we are doing things, we cannot say, we've got a new authority, a new way of doing business, let's try and fit it into these existing rules. We have to look at, do these rules apply anymore? Do we need to change the rules? Do we need to change the law? And the old way of thinking was, we've got this rigid set of rules, how does this new technology fit into them? And let's make it as ineffective as possible. I mean, that wasn't the mindset, but that's what ended up happening. So yes, now it is, if you have an impediment, and this is coming from the assistant secretary level, assistant secretary of war, or assistant secretary of the Air Force, if something is in your way, tell me and I will remove it. So it is at the highest level that everyone is willing to break down barriers. And if you need the law changed, tell me, I'll go talk to Congress.
So, I mean, I second what Tim just said, but regarding certificate occupancy, there are things that we don't know how to manage. We know that we don't know how to manage that yet, right? So we have partnered with the National Institute of Building Sciences, and to really help us figure out what that construction oversight process look like, and so that our teams in the field can actually do that without impeding the workflow. And part of that also includes training for them, so we can kind of get over the screen of the newness of it, right? So we're trying to do it in parallel while we're executing this program, so that when the constructors do the first module shows up on the base, it doesn't look like an alien thing that just landed on. It's not the spaceship, right? Because it's somewhat looks like that. It's wrapped in plastic and stuff. Like, what the hell is that, right? So we don't want them to feel that. So we're working in parallel to make sure that doesn't happen. So we still want to be a safe and secure building, for sailors. So we need to ensure that happens. So that's the foundation. But part of it is we don't want the culture clashes to happen. So we are planning to solve for that in parallel through kind of teams of experts to help us kind of manage towards that.
All right, next question. Let's keep these
We have
as
a
tight
ton
as
of
possible,
questions.
so we can get as many. There's a lot of people who has hands up, so
So
go for it.
Randall Thompson with Navy Prefab, a general contractor in California. First, just applaud the approach you guys are taking to this. It's a big task, and I think you're onto the right solution to achieve it. But the first thing that came to mind when you were mentioning all this is supply. That's a pretty significant manufacturing demand, and it's likely going to require multiple manufacturers over the course of the program to achieve all that. Have you given consideration to how you might work to develop some standards or standardization amongst the design of your product so that you can achieve consistency across the board, therefore leading to increased efficiencies and cost reductions over the course of the program?
Yeah, our intention is to have a standard module across all services with customization of the interior.
For the 27 program, for the huge bump up, there'll be the project. There'll be a look for an Air Force version. There'll be a Navy version, and there'll be a Marine Corps version. Just because the timing required to bring that together is tight, but the future years we want to come together to find the right standards to make sure that it's a single thing. But for the Marine Corps, we're looking at almost 4 million square feet in 27. For the other, there'll be a single standard that you go after for the time.
Thank you. Jeff Harper Construction, coming from as a prime traditional contractor, so I'm here to learn and try to figure this out because I know it's coming from the top down, but you've got a massive task ahead of you because I see about 30 GCs that we can compete against nationwide, several of them in the room here you've mentioned, and to now throw really most of them out of business is what's happening, and going to the modular, which is what's going to happen, and have and all their suppliers and everyone is a huge change. So it's going to be a lot of difficulty for you. I don't see you being able to follow the FCs right away. We've had that problem. We've got an ACM project down in Yuma in one of the barracks, and it was such a task to try to, the culture class, what you're saying. I also see you just changing the gears. Now you're going to all multi-billion-dollar companies is what it's going to change to now, as opposed to us, firms, because you're talking about $1 billion, $1.5 billion. So there's only a few entities that can bond that much. So you're looking to shove all this incredible work down into one methodology, of which you said each have 1 or 2 projects you've done over the last few years. And now we're going to switch whole scale. I see that as a difficulty, but we got to try to figure it out. Bonding is huge, but the big thing is also cybersecurity. No one's mentioned that. So CMMC has taken over the world. So everyone here is going to have to learn how to get your CMMC certification. It's going to take you $20,000 to $50,000 per firm. We've spent $1 million over the last 4 years to get there. Do any federal work, you got to get that security clearance stuff. Just wanted to throw that out. And this is a big, big deal.
Yeah, I would. It's not necessarily that we are just going to go to multi-billion-dollar firms. There's certainly the opportunity to do joint ventures, obviously, especially in instances, and I'm not saying we're going to do this, but if we were to have situations where we are going to build in multiple locations, that's a perfect opportunity for different constructors who have presences in different locations to join up and work together. And we're not going modular on every type of facility. So the Department of War is not going all modular for everything. There are still other facilities that will be traditional brick and mortar construction. So that's not the entirety of what our portfolio will be. So there will still be other opportunities.
So can I just address that question? I mean, one of the that's a really good point, and I wrote it down. Part of this, the approach we're taking in some of the projects is we're trying to bring on, like Tim said, like multiple firms, and we are based on their potentially a bonding capacity. We may split projects among firms. So we may not just go, even though we may have a $2 billion project, it may not go to one vendor. It may go to 3 or 4 vendors because we don't want to put all eggs in one basket either because it's risky for us. So we understand the bonding is a thing, but we were trying to use a single acquisition approach to go after those programs. Exactly, is it going to be a single vendor? Is it going to be multiple vendors? That's up to the pricing, the approach, and then the bonding capacity. So we are taking that into account, but we are testing it out in the first project, which we're working in the next few months. And then we're trying to apply that for the next subsequent project, especially 27. So hope that I really helped answer the question, but we're working through that. We do understand that's an issue for especially some of the bigger GCs, and also almost impossible for the other smaller manufacturing firms out there. So
yeah, and regarding bonding, we had an industry event last week about not industrialized construction per se, but using new authorities, and bonding issues came up. And one of the things we're going to explore is how do we perhaps adjust bonding? Because if we have a contract for $1 billion, we don't need you to hold $1 billion in bonds for the entire contract, because that's not all at risk the entire time. So how do we adjust that, and what can we legally do to make that more palatable to industry so you're not holding that huge bond for the entire length of the contract?
Yeah, Congress has asked us for reform to Miller Act, and we just didn't know how to answer that question exactly. So if you have any ideas on, like, based on the scale of the problem, how it could be, because we still need the bonding to, it's a protection mechanism for us, right? So, and it's, public dollar. So if you have solutions to that, we'd love to hear that.
Michael Matthews, CEO of Semplitch Works. We're actually working on a 595-unit project in Guam that was private and is now being, I think, dropped into the RFP as a joint venture with the Navy. So I have some recent, at least data for you, is that we found there's anywhere between 18 to about 35% delta upward in regards going from standardized code to basically UFC standards. And so we're trying to figure out what that means and why. And I'd love to talk to you guys afterward, because that was really one of the biggest things, is that we worked with 2 GCs on the island that are quite familiar with military. This is a new project that is just southwest of Camp Laws. And the long and short is that we found a massive swing, and we really couldn't figure out why the numbers were swinging. A lot of it had to do with clearance issues, blast-resistant requirements, and also MEP connectivity. So just to give you an idea on that.
Chris, talk to that person.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to ask you about it.
It's their fault. I know progressive collapse has been a big thing if it's a multi-story, but that's going to be removed. Yeah, the progressive collapse requirements are going to be removed from the UFC, is my understanding. Well, Mr. Brown said they're coming out, so.
Okay, we've got about 10 minutes left in Q&A, and I've got about 10 hands that I've counted, and more are coming. So we're going to try and get through as many as we can.
We're going to just take one more, and we're going to stay ahead of schedule here. So, all right, and these guys aren't going anywhere, so you can get them in the network session. So let's get the last question up.
Okay, great. My name is Jeff Lubell. I am a senior fellow with the ULI Terwilliger Center for Housing. we are in partnership with another organization. We are supporting a working group of the 9 northeastern states from Pennsylvania to Maine, working to support the expanded use of offsite construction to produce lower cost homes. So we're looking at a lot of other similar kind of demand aggregation through public-private partnerships with the state. So if anyone's interested in that, I'd love to talk to you. But my question for you is really whether there might be opportunities to leverage military procurement into the residential space to really help us solve some of the problems. So one of the things, for example, that we're really interested in is trying to scale up standardized production systems, let's say for multifamily housing. So when we get outside of barracks to residential, right, standardizing standardized production systems, if we could pioneer them and scale them in the military, we could then apply them to produce lower cost homes outside of the military, right, in the residential space. Similar on the bulk purchases of standardized single family homes, duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes. It would be really great to have a partnership between the military and the residential use so that we can produce lower cost homes and leverage your scale. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that would be a wonderful thing. I won't claim credit that that was something we were thinking about, but certainly interested in pursuing that.
So I do want to adjust my answer I provided earlier. Barracks, CDCs, secure spaces, and housing, because Navy is responsible for all the Guam housing, which we do execute over there. So that is absolutely one of the top projects that we want to look at, areas we want to look at for industrialized construction. So, but rest of the CONUS is all privatized. So we have to adjust the agreements and whatnot to do that. So we don't actually do construction of housing in the CONUS anymore because it's been privatized for decades now. But only place we do truly approach construction right now is in Guam at this point for all the services. But I want to ask the gentleman with the amazing Texas hat. I don't know, I love it. He had a question.
Hey,
Love your hat, sir.
You had a
for
cool
your hat,
hat,
you
so
get
you
to
get
ask
the
a
last question.
Great. All right, technical difficulty. So having recently retired as an installation commander, I see this movement from the FAR to the OTA as a seismic change amongst all the services. What are the service secretary's guidance to the execution arm? And how do you move the frozen middle who are so welded to those processes of the past to make a difference with the new progressive design build capture?
Well, that's simple. Undersecretary Marks from Department of War said, "Thou shalt do this," starting in 28. And Undersecretary Borders for the Air Force said, "We can be better. We'll do it in 27." So we are moving out, and there is no mercy given to anyone who is not interested in participating. It is a go-do, and we are aggressively pursuing it. And for the Air Force, it is all MILCON, all O&M operations and maintenance projects over $7.5 million. And I just briefed the Secretariat 2 days ago on our status in getting there. And essentially, the only way to get a waiver to that is if there are significant mission impacts to converting a project to progressive design build or some other alternate delivery method.
Our Navy policy is imminently going to be signed. It's very similar to the Air Force. It's not as restrictive, but it's pretty much saying 27 and beyond. But it's pretty much the same flavor. But there are situations where we'll have to do the traditional design bid build because one of the biggest reasons is we still have areas where it's seismic and not seismic explosive arc, for example, right? For NOSAR requirements, which requires full design for them to approve those projects before moving forward. So we do think progressive design build may be a means to execute in that means, but that's where we are running into some challenges. Other than that, same thing. If we have to go anything other than alternative delivery methods, we have to go to the Secretary of the Navy to get a waiver at this point. So at least at the top levels down, it's been fundamentally changed. In terms of the frozen middle, you just asked, Professor, it's a huge cultural change we are actively trying to solve for, right? We haven't solved it yet. There are people who we just don't, because those folks, those folks not intentionally, unintentionally, because they've been learned or taught to do it a certain way. We need to bring them along, try to inspire them to make sure that they can do it this way and find value in what they need to do in that space. So it is a huge leadership challenge, and we are actively working every day, not only ourselves, but across the world, across the commanders, across the Navy and the Air Force and the Army, trying to make that happen.
Okay, we're going to still be ahead of schedule, I hope. And thank you for this lively conversation. Please, round of applause for our panelists. And I think it's pretty obvious. The best shoes, you guys got me by a mile. You get a coaster. Best hat, you get a coaster from HUD. Way to go. All of you enjoy 30 minutes.
We have a 30-minute networking break just out the doors where you registered. We'll be back at 3:30 to look at the future of supply. Please go enjoy some food and drink. And Karthik, Tim, you're going to be very popular. We have a lot of questions that we didn't get to for you guys.